In Chapter 1, we focus on the ways of acquiring knowledge with a specific focus on the scientific method. In Chapter 2, we discussed how to formulate research problems through the literature review. In Chapter 3, we discussed the core principles that we must follow when conducting research in an ethical manner. In this chapter, we will explore the basic cultural issues that need to be taken into account when doing a social work research study. According to our text, our world has become a village due to faster means of transportation, expansion of trade, and the human desire to seek a better life. Our communities, our schools, and even our workplaces are becoming more diverse, creating a unique challenge for researchers to work effectively in any setting. Most researchers need to work very closely with stakeholders. For those individuals that have a vested interest in the outcomes of our research. You must be able to develop working relationships with many different people within the community to achieve community engagement. So diversity is reflected through our society, in schools, in the workplace, and within all types of formal organizations. Social service organizations are no exception. There's an increasing diversity both among staff and among service recipients. Of course, diversity also has an impact on social work research. The challenge for researchers is to work effectively in culturally diverse settings. Most research projects are not done in isolation. Rather, they are completed by a team of professionals working very closely to accomplish a similar task. The following questions should be considered when forming a research team that may potentially guide you through a research study. What history, i.e. prior practice and research knowledge of the group community, does the research team have with the racial ethnic group members included in your study? What efforts have been made to ensure the inclusion of the perspective of racial ethnic group members in the design, conduct, and analysis of the study? What is the race ethnicity of the research team, including the principal investigator, the consultants, the data collectors, and the coders? Have potential biases of research team members been recognized? And what efforts have been made to counter potential biases of the research team in working with racial ethnic minority groups? According to the text, culture exists at both the micro and macro level, with individuals, and is reflected in your personal values, your beliefs, and your communication styles at the micro level. At the macro level, culture exists at a level of organization, at the institution, and even in the communities. It may be manifested in mandates, policies, and even practices. Culture acts as a filter through which people perceive the world around them. It provides a framework from which people access information, how they think, communicate, and behave. An example of how culture can affect a research study can be found in a text. According to the text, most research studies conducted in the United States use techniques centered around a white culture. Anger is a trait that correlates very highly with alcohol abuse in Caucasian populations. However, anger in American Indian populations is more an expression and is inversely correlated with alcohol abuse. Anger in Indian populations is actually a positive factor that helps American Indians stay motivated to improve their lives. So culture is many things. It's a set of customs, traditions, beliefs, and a worldview. It is socially defined and passed from one generation to the next. Researchers are expected to be aware of differences among people and be mindful of the implications cultural differences have on the research and evaluation process. This is accomplished by, first, understanding the impact of culture on human and social processes and the evaluation processes. And second, skills in the cross-cultural communication can ensure that they can effectively interact with people from diverse backgrounds. Cultural awareness is needed by social workers to ensure their own perceptions, communications, and actions are not influenced by ethnocentrism, enculturalization, and stereotyping, or poor cultural awareness. Ethnocentrism is the idea that we tend to generate opinions of others and other cultures based on the standards of our own beliefs and values. For example, child rearing in some groups is believed to be a community responsibility and may include many extended family members in raising the child. This is important for a teacher to understand when trying to support family literacy at home. However, many North American families have become more nuclear rather than extended, relying on immediate family members to raise children. Enculturation refers to the fact that as children we believe to behave in ways that are appropriate to our culture. we tend to adopt beliefs about human nature, human experience, and human behavior, which in turn will teach us how to behave, interact, and think. For example, the meaning of time is viewed differently by different groups. Some groups define time as being early. Others do not view being early with much importance. Groups that think this way may be viewed as lazy, disinterested, and maybe even uncooperative. However, this is far from the truth. Intercultural communication refers to the need to understand communication patterns of different cultures so that we may respond accordingly, preventing any possible misunderstandings. Non-verbal communication is an important form of communication among cultures that is represented in our body language, also in our facial expressions, our use of space, and even in our hand gestures. For example, in many North American groups, eye contact is a sign of respect. However, to make eye contact in the Japanese community is perceived as disrespectful. Verbal communication also conveys more meaning than just the word spoken. For example, in the Japanese culture, the use of the word hi conveys more than just yes. It also conveys disagreement as well. An understanding of cultural framework patterns is essential to ensure data collection and analytical processes are appropriate and final research reports are practical and relevant. To do this, we must look at orientation to data, decision-making, individualization, tradition, and pace of life for any cultural studies. Orientation to data. The North American culture thrives on hard data, or data that can be acted upon immediately. Latin American cultures are more dialogue-oriented, rather than data-oriented, paying more attention to relationships and patterns that may exist. Decision-making. In Western cultures, logic and rationality are highly valued and used to make most important decisions. This is also an example of a positivistic approach. However, other cultures prefer a softer, more personal approach to knowledge development. This is known as an interpretive approach. Individualism. Although all cultures have some individualistic and collective tendencies, most Western cultures, especially in the U.S., focus on individualistic goals, competitions, and achievement. In a collectivist culture, they are more group-oriented, loyal, and focused on building meaningful relationships. Tradition. Change-oriented traditions such as those in the U.S. are encouraged to innovate and view change as a necessity. In Asian cultures, values are centered on tradition, and the younger generation is expected to follow the older generation's way of doing things. Pace of life. In large U.S. cities, we live at an accelerated pace, filling our schedules and organizing our day by the clock. Deadlines, promptness, and organization are key to this pace. In other cultures, such as in Europe or Latin America, life is at a slower pace. Rest is preferred, long lunches are taken, long vacations. It's a focus on relationship building. Cultural awareness is the ability to understand the impact of culture on all human values, attitudes, behaviors, and interactions. Researchers who participate in a diverse setting need a high degree of self-awareness as well as an understanding of their own cultural values and the impact of these values and their own communication patterns in relationships and professional work. Cultural awareness is brought about more by experience with contact with a culture rather than reading about it or doing a research about it. Intercultural communication skills refer to being able to approach anyone with acceptance and openness, which is the foundation to interpersonal communication. Know the meaning of both verbal and nonverbal communication can reduce or eliminate communication barriers that may exist. In developing specific knowledge about the culture, it often begins with a literature review to identify communication patterns, beliefs, attitudes, values, and perspectives. A perspective on sensitive issues within our social world prior to conducting research is essential, but contact and being a part of that culture is the best way to become culturally aware. Adapting research studies requires a focus on working with stakeholders to identify specific areas and levels of interest that a potential project may provoke, and using this information to drive research question formation and the methodology selected. Adapting our process requires taking information learned from the stakeholders and adapting the way in which the data is collected or how people are recruited to ensure we are sensitive to issues of importance and inclusive in our implementation. Providing meaningful products that can actually be applied as a result of the outcomes of our research. This takes form of a close partnership with our stakeholders to ensure potential outcomes will have meaning for all groups involved. As stated previously, the purpose of this chapter is to explore basic issues that need to be taken into account when doing a social research study.